What's up, nerds? Welcome back to Cartoon Universe and the world of Exandria as we inch ever closer to the Mighty Nine becoming the Mighty Nine. My name is Elle, I'm the channel's resident Dungeons & Dragons nerd, and while I've seen the first campaign of hit actual play Critical Role, I can't say the same for the second, which is what this series is based on, so I'm in an interesting spot when it comes to reviewing this series. I've covered the trailers, I've covered the pilot, and now we finish out the first batch of episodes released with Who Will You Be and the Fletching and Moondrop Traveling Carnival of Curiosities. First, a quick discussion of spoilers. In this and future videos, I will be discussing the events of each new episode, and doing so with the expectation that you have seen them too. If you decide to come here for our review before diving into the series proper, I'm flattered, but I also want you to know what you're getting into. On the other side of the coin, while I understand a lot of people are going to be watching this series and these videos because they've seen the original campaign, I remind you that I and others have not, and I am attempting to review this series on its own merits. As such, I ask you to mark any spoilers of your own you might leave in the comments. I don't want to stop the conversation, I would just like the same fair warning that I have given you. Alright, with that out of the way, let's quest. Where the pilot solidly established the Dwendalian Empire's prejudiced place in this precarious political setting, these episodes flipped the script to examine their imperfect victims, the Kryn Dynasty. Our visits to the palace confirm their use of the beacon as an ark of souls, a promise of resurrection which forms the cornerstone of their entire society. For better or worse, as we are shown consequences both positive and negative of this practice. The theft of the beacon is an act of war, but without the beacon to ensure the return of the soldiery, the necessity of war becomes unsustainable. Dunamancers are essential pillars of the community right up until their knowledge is exposed and they become potential enemies of the state. When one is continually promised a future life, the present can lose its significance, and so the general puts off his dreams of having children until it's too late. And having past lives isn't any less harmful than future ones. Essex's mother has essentially magical reincarnation Alzheimer's, and rather than acknowledge their social order potentially having negative side effects, victims of this affliction are demonized and executed. The promise of eternal renewal is a beautiful one, but what do you do when that promise can no longer be truthfully kept? Because if your society can be thrown into chaos by the loss of a single object, I have to question its baseline stability. And point blank on all of these consequences is Essex, Mr. Anime Cool Guy Pillar Lean himself. A man so mysterious and edgy, he literally floats everywhere. He sees his mother destabilize and dismiss her own death, his friend live for the promise of the next life instead of the one he has, his queen lie to his people for the sake of stability. He hasn't been consecuted, which seems to be a term for induction into the state religion, and while it's yet unclear if this is his own choice or one made for him, it's clear that this sets him apart even from his own family. Despite apparently having attained significant status in the Korean government, the Bright Queen doesn't seem to appreciate his academic, rational approach to a religious crisis, shutting down his desire to study the beacon's positive potential in greater depth. All of these struggles seem reasonable and even relatable to many viewers. However, having seen what the beacon can do on just a surface level, knowing what I know about the world-rending power of primordial magic in D&D, I can't say I totally disagree with the Bright Queen's reticence. And when Essex calls out the social devastation of the beacon's loss, correct though he may be, it's hard to feel sorry for him knowing he brought that on himself. That's right, just when I thought the Nine were getting a surprise 8th member, it turns out Essex is Ickathon's source of beacon knowledge. I guess his desire to study the beacon outweighed the present well-being of his nation, or perhaps he's not as disconnected from his people's resurrection mentality as he might like to think. I have to say, this introduction to the character is a fantastic way of getting the audience invested in an antagonist, outlining all of the reasons his decisions are understandable, hypocritical, and just not worth it. Between seeing what Essex is now and the beacon showing everything he could be, I'm just as interested in how our villains develop as our heroes. Let's quickly get back to the world they live in. Rather than keep this continental conflict simply two-sided, episode 2 adds another log to the fire about to be lit under our heroes, the cosmopolitan trade hub of Nicodranas. On the one hand, the city's leadership is pushing for an alliance with the Dwendalians, citing lucrative trade relations and similar anti-Kryn sentiments. On the other, the populace doesn't necessarily seem to agree. Public humiliation of government officials aside, Nicodranas is a lot more racially diverse than the Empire, with tieflings, kenku, and minotaurs walking the streets just as freely as they might in the Kryn Dynasty, which makes sense. Nicodranas is a coastal port town, they get all kinds. Overall, the friction between security and freedom runs deep in Nicodranas. The guards outside might take issue with a half-orc, but once inside, he has no trouble. The fopdoodle might throw everyone in jail who says no to him, but people are saying no to him. Speaking of, we return to our characters with the lovely couple, starting as episode 2 does with Fjord. Sorry, Ford. Why is the J there if you're not going to pronounce it? Whatever, it's fine. Between the trailers and the intro, Fjord has been defined as the shipwrecked sailor, and that is definitely backed up by his story. The wreck is how he ends up in the story, how he gains his magical ability. abilities. He is dressed in the wreckage of his former life. But as we learn, the shipwreck isn't the one defining influence of his life, it's just the latest in a series. Being told he's a weakling outcast as a half-orc, he's learned to act the part. Once the captain talks him up, he can act with confidence, right up until someone tells him otherwise, with deadly consequences. He didn't choose his patron, it imposed itself upon him, and he leans on Jester to try and understand that arrangement. Even with power, he can't choose to help someone himself, even a scared kid just like him. He can be a hero, but only when Jester says he is. Between his captain, his bullies, his new bestie, and his new patron, his sense of self is entirely rooted in others' perceptions of him, in fulfilling others' expectations. Much like his new character class, his ego is a glass cannon, powerful when loaded, but extremely fragile. And that kind of reflective character can be fascinating to see develop. How will the rest of the Nine see him, and how will that affect his place in the party? Will Jester's influence let him fake heroism until he makes it, or will something cause her to see through him and they both fall apart? Will this deep dark patron drag him under, or will Fjord find the fight in him to claim this power for himself? And what is this patron? It clearly has a history with Fjord's captain, a negative one, and it also might be backing his nemesis Sabian. Something tells me this won't help Fjord become the man his captain wanted him to be. And what does it want? Is it saying become? Does it want Fjord to become something more under its watch? Or was that beacon? Does it want the same thing everyone else does and wants Fjord to get it? Speaking of players with patrons, Jester is finally here, and she is everything I'd hoped and more. The intro promised me a cutesy chaos queen, and the episode delivers. Her upbringing among classy courtesans does a lot to contextualize her sexual openness and sense of humor and drama. Not explain away or excuse, contextualize. We stan a respectful, humanizing depiction of sex work. Between her whimsy, feminine interests, and close relationship with her mother, I can see how people in and out of universe might read Jester as childish or even unstable, but such a read would be distinctly uncharitable. Fun and family bonding aren't age-locked, and besides, her whimsy has the mandate of heaven, and in a Bugs Bunny-esque way, it's rooted in a sense of justice. She'll prank the hoity-toity patrons and patricians of the city, but she also pulls her weight to help the working girls backstage. I did call her and Fjord being a couple, not that the promotions made that difficult, and they are setting up to be a stunning example of she fell first, he fell harder, but even without the romantic angle, these characters are such a wonderful odd couple. Where Fjord's self-confidence is unstable, Jester's cup runneth over enough for both of them. Where he is overcautious, she gives nary a thought to the consequences of any action, the latter causing just as much trouble as the former. Where Fjord is striving to understand his patron's magic, Jester is content to simply soak in the traveler's will all around her, all of her spells being so undeniably her own. Not that her relationship with her god is perfect. As personal as her relationship with the traveler may be, he seems to abandon his disciple at inopportune moments, and the way Jester insists upon the traveler's influence and benevolence sounds almost like she's trying to convince herself as much as anyone else. This hardly makes the traveler straight up evil, but perhaps Fjord isn't the only one relying on Jester to be their hype woman. Before we get to the last of our protagonists, let's check in with our pilot trio. Bo is learning from Dyron, enough to be sent out into the field on a secret mission. Though given Dyron's critiques, it's anyone's guess whether she thinks Bo is actually ready or just doesn't have anyone else to send. She's doing better than Deadeye, though, in some interesting ways. Deadeye accuses Cobalt Soul expositors of having lots of learning but no smarts, a description which could not be further from Bo. She doesn't know how to use a basic message stone, but her observant streak continues with her connecting the residuum evidence to the Volstrucker agents. And while she may not have the head for a tactical retreat just yet, she does have enough restraint to not get into anything in the fighting tent like I expected, and enough paranoia to avoid getting got, unlike Deadeye. But that same paranoia could be a problem as our characters come together, especially as she already mistrusts Caleb and Not. How long will she follow Dyron's advice and trust no one? What will it take for her to trust Molly's cards instead, to know that she can't do it alone? Speaking of the Volstruckers and our other leads, it seems Caleb has a past with the assassins, or possibly even a past among them. We know that Volstrucker residuum implants enhance magical abilities. Perhaps they cut off magic when removed. His murder charge was from a long time ago, maybe when he was still under their control. He certainly seems familiar with their thralling techniques. We've never seen Caleb's forearms. Who's to say he doesn't have some maze tattoos under those sleeves? Whatever the Volstruckers did to him, it left him enough trauma to distract from his own master plan, and if his necklace banter with Not is anything to go by, possibly had something to do with his family. Speaking of their relationship, it's not perfect yet. They can still get at each other's throats, but they're learning, shoring up each other's weaknesses despite all the trouble they cause. And that is something I'm enjoying about this series. The protagonists do cause trouble. Their actions and flaws have consequences not only for them, but the innocents around them. Fjord can't act to save others. Jester gets her family attacked. When our cop and robbers beat, it's to the detriment of the innkeepers and entertainers around them. And entertainers, there there are, as it's episode 3, we finally reach the carnival, and with it, its master of ceremonies. It's Mollymauk time. This episode quickly gets you invested in our final character simply by contrast, opening on a shattered man before jumping back to his being whole. We know something is going to destroy his world, the question is what? And that theme of mystery is woven throughout his character, one so surrounded in mystique and panache. Throughout the episode, between his multi-meaning tattoos and tarot, his love of both magic and trickery, and his talking and encouraging riddles, this man wears his heart on his sleeve, but wrapped in art and artifice. His cards don't lie, but he does when he thinks people need to hear it. He seems cavalier about the impending war, but between his constant placations and insistence that the show must go on, he is devoted to shielding his world from pain, denying fear in favor of joy and peace. But denial can't last forever, and when that peace breaks, so does he. When the toad venom hits the fan, when all his work comes to nothing, something is unleashed in Molly. Something he clearly never wanted to see again. He says the red eyes mean never look back, and when those eyes open, all his care disappears. Side note, this show has a thing for dudes inheriting their father figure's swords, huh? I wish I could talk more about Molly's character from a D&D perspective, but he's sporting a homebrew class, the eerily named Blood Hunter. I don't know what's going on with him, and I can't wait to find out. Molly built himself a house of cards, it came tumbling down, and I look forward to seeing if he picks up the pieces, builds again stronger, or burns it all down. Not that he'll need much help with that last option. As promised in the trailers, the carnival was a disaster, and as promised by our characters' natures, it's all their fault. I've got to say, on both the grand scale with the politics and the small scale with the carnival disaster, this show is great at building tension, filling up the powder keg, and tossing in the match. And with this, our characters are together at last, unfortunately for them. Or almost. We'll get to you, Yasha. I'm calling it right now, episode 4 is going to be them fixing their mistake, and maybe, just maybe, halfway through season 1, they'll finally discover the beacon plot and become the Mighty Nine. I'm certainly looking forward to our party's first proper quest, but for now, this was a lot to cover. If you'd like to see more on the Mighty Nine, be sure to subscribe for future videos, and if you liked this video, give a thumbs up and check out some of my others on this channel. If you want to discuss Mighty Nine and beyond, leave a comment below, remember to mark your spoilers, and check the pinned comment for the Cartoon Universe Discord server. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and may all your homebrew be balanced.